And my name is, and my name is Tzintzun Aguilar-Izzo. We are joining you today as settlers standing on Ganingahaga Mohawk territory. We want to acknowledge our role as settlers on this territory and the fact that we're living on land that has been stewarded by indigenous communities since time immemorial. We also want to acknowledge that we're living close to our friend and guardian caretaker, the St. Regis River. I want to acknowledge the St. Regis River, who is part of our conversation today. And now, without further ado, yes, Blake and I together form the collective Talking Wings, but today we'll be speaking on behalf of the organization Talking Rivers. And who are Talking Rivers? Talking Rivers is a group of humans, both from indigenous and non-indigenous communities, who work within the St. Lawrence River watershed and also the Adirondack watersheds. We strive to educate our human neighbors about our roles, rights, and responsibilities within nature. And to do that, we believe it is our responsibility as humans within these watersheds to advocate for the rights of nature. You may have heard of us since before we have advocated specifically for the rights of Racket River, and we're currently working with the town of Potsdam, New York, also on Haudenosaunee territory, which is striving to draft a law, a binding local law that will protect the legal rights of Racket River.
So today's presentation is going to be specifically about the Listening to Nature Toolkit, an ecocentric pluralistic guide to decision making that Talking River has created and launched this past August. And before we delve into the toolkit, I think I would like to tell you all where it came from. So Talking Rivers has been for years advocating for the rights of the other than human world, for the rights of rivers and their ecosystems. But when we pushed for municipalities or even talking to individuals about changing the legal system to include the rights of non-humans, the rights of nature, we found ourselves hitting the roadblock. A cultural roadblock. Practically, how do you pass legislation that grants rights to nature in a society that sees nature as a commodity, something to be bought and sold, something that is an object and is not alive? So this is why the Listening to Nature Toolkit came to be, because we thought that in order to shift the legal system that ultimately governs the way in which we make decisions, in which we interact with the environment, we need to first of all shift the culture so that when you come to propose a law, it's not going to be such a big step. And we thought that in order to shift the culture, we could start with the place where we work. And this could be, for example, a nonprofit environment or a community group. Like, what if we bring rights of nature to a nonprofit and a community group? How would that affect the way that these groups make decisions? So the Listening to Nature Toolkit, now we're going to delve more in depth, but essentially offers ways to shift the language you use to honor the personhood of nature. It also offers decision-making models that organization and community groups can use to represent ecosystems. We have sample language that could be included in environmental easements and organizing documents, and we're going to go through all of them. And we also have steps for listening to the ecosystem and co-creating with them.
But before we delve into the body of this work, and again, I want to specify that the Listening to Nature Toolkit is available online, and at the end of the presentation, we'll share with you the link. But before we delve in deeper, we need to first talk about the reason we're all here today, and that is nature. What is nature? I invite you all to maybe close your eyes or keep your eyes open and think about the nature that's surrounding you. Nature is very culturally specific. The concept of nature depends when you talk about nature, it depends from culture to culture, from language to language you're using, what nature means. So as you think about right now the nature that's around you, it's important to realize that this conception of nature that comes to you is also conditioned from the place that you live, from the family that raised you, from the culture that you inhabit. And in the case of the conversation tonight, we are all speaking we're speaking to you in English. And in English, usually the concept of nature excludes humans. Humans are divided from nature. Nature is usually specified as something that's outside the human realm, whereas humans just usually are specified or talked about as these entities that use or abuse nature, divided from nature. However, in Talking Rivers, we try to teach that nature is within us and all around us. From the bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live inside and on our own bodies, to the tree that is outside the rooms that you all are sitting in, all of the beings that fly and swim and crawl and walk and run around us. This is all nature. And we believe that if nature is all around us, we feel nature in all the life that's flowing around us, and thus nature is alive. And we believe personally that nature is also conscious. Conscious because nature, the world around us, is aware, just like we are aware. They have their own intelligence, their own way of knowing the world. A tree, a fungi, they all have their own way of knowing the world. Even a river has their own way of knowing the world. So that, for us, is nature.
And this brings us to an ecocentric perspective that has been guiding Talking Rivers over these years and that we have been using in educating communities. An ecocentric perspective asks us, human, to see nature not as a commodity, not as something to be bought and sold. Rivers, mountains, oceans, trees, foxes, they're all people. And we are all part of an immense tapestry of life. What does this mean? It means that if something happens to the trees, if something happens to the water, if something happens to the bees, it happens to everybody, including humans. And like all beings, humans have rights, roles, and responsibilities within ecosystems. Of course, if bees stopped pollinating, which we could consider their responsibility to pollinate, the entire ecosystem will collapse. And this goes for so many beings that are keeping us all alive and we are not even aware of what they're doing. Humans as well have responsibilities towards the ecosystem they inhabit, but unfortunately we often have forgotten them. And also, as part of the ecocentric perspective, as we said before, humans are part of nature. Humans are not divided. We are nature as much as everybody else. And this brings us to one of the first sections of the toolkit. How do we honor an ecocentric perspective? We can start shifting culture and honoring ecocentric perspective by using an ecocentric language. And I'm sure most of you might have probably heard of different scholars that are proposing this shift in language. One of them is Robin Wall Kimmerer. Here we propose one way to do this. Particularly in the English language, when we refer to nature as it. It, though, is a pronoun that objectifies the object or being that it refers to. So a car is an it, a chair is an it, but a cat is also a it in the English language. A tree is a it, a river is a it. So if we compare a car to a cat, and we both call them it, we are unconsciously we are making the assumption that they are essentially the same thing, and thus, if something is an object, it can be used and abused. So, going with the shift in the ecocentric language, what if instead we started using different pronouns when we talked about other than human beings? What if we used he or she? Or if we did not want to ascribe a human gender to another than human being, what if we use they, a gender neutral pronoun? And also, these will go along the effort of recognizing that rivers, foxes, whales, or mountains, trees, they are people, not human people, foxes people, fish people, tree people, but they're people. And as science, Western science is showing more and more, and we are more and more becoming aware that not only human cultures exist. All different species and ecosystems have their own cultures and their own balances and their own way of organizing their own society, which effectively makes them people as much as human, but in their own way. So, and a way to also honor the personhood, the fact that we are talking about people and not things when we refer to nature, we could not only just shift the pronoun, but also use the name of that being. For example, let's say we have a pine tree in the yard. Instead of saying, oh, it looks so beautiful today, we can say, pine tree looks beautiful today.
And all of the things that Blake just shared, all of these steps for acknowledging the personhood of the other than human world, in the toolkit, we've outlined different steps that anyone from an individual to organization can take to honor the other than human beings, the more than human beings who you're referring to with the English language. And these steps can be used again by an organization, a nonprofit, but can even be used at a personal level within a family, in a classroom, in any setting in which humans are gathering and talking and communicating. So one of the first steps that we offer is to change the language you use during conversations and meetings. This means that when you're communicating with a fellow human being and you're sharing something about a river, tree, chipmunk, you strive to be aware of the pronouns you use, of the words that you're using to describe them, and you strive not to use the pronoun it, not to objectify them. This is a long and complicated process, and it requires us to really change the way that we think. You can be patient with yourself and with others. You can help others as well and remind them, of course, very kindly, of how, what's the better ways to refer to these other beings that we're sharing this beautiful world with. Then, if you're part of an organization, it can be even a business or a nonprofit, it could also be the next step to review your organization's bylaws, organizing documents, social media posts, website, to make sure that in how when you're sharing something about the other than human world in writing, that you're not objectifying them, that you're not treating them as an object. We at Talking Rivers have done this to all of our own organizational documents and our website and all the media that we share with the world. And to do this, we created a Nature Personhood Blueprint, which is a guide. You can find it on the toolkit. It's a guide that can help others in this journey as well. I recommend, though, that every organization who applies this doesn't just copy what we wrote, but they create something that would work for them, for their needs. And of course, once you have this blueprint, it's important to then train, work with the people who are part of your organization, who are part of your community group, who are even part of your classrooms, so you can guide them through this process together and you can all learn together. We are personally still learning. And now I'm going to talk about one of the main subjects of the talk tonight, which is ecocentric governance. Ecocentric, as Blake has described, means that we're not putting the human at the center of the universe. We're saying that the ecosystem that we're all part of, is the center of the work that we're doing, of the language we're using. And when it comes to the word governance, governance is a very complicated word. When most people think of governance, they think of this top-down a ruler commanding their subjects. The word governance thus comes with a very heavy baggage. So when we talk about the word governance, we usually refer to decision making instead, which decision making happens at all times. It happens within families, it happens in your own head, it happens within communities, it happens in classrooms. Decision making is constantly occurring. So when we're talking about decision making, we want to make sure that we're asking the question, who is making that decision? Who is at the decision-making table? As we know, currently, this question has been very heavily politicized. And many more people see or being systematically excluded from the decision-making table. When we think about who's a part of the decision-making table of the organization, the company where you work, any time a decision is being made, usually we find that the decision makers are being restricted. Less and less people are involved in that process of making decisions. Now we're also living at a time when what we know now as AI, which is basically a very, very fancy algorithm with a huge data set, is making decisions for humans, which means that this algorithm, coded by people with their own biases, is making decisions for humans. So we're living at a time when the people who are making decisions are being restricted, and when more and more people are not part of, who are not sitting at this table. We personally believe that when people are making decisions, let's say a nonprofit organization, they need to be very aware, if they're talking to board directors or the employees, very aware of who they're affecting, and the fact that if they're affecting anyone, and humans specific, we're talking about humans now, that if they're affecting someone, whether it be someone who's in part of the community where they're working, or who's working in a sweatshop around the world who's producing the t-shirts that the nonprofit is giving away, those people we personally believe in some way should be represented in the decisions that are being taken. Yet here we're talking about nature, listening to nature. So we are asking folks to take it even one step further, to think, how can we include the voice of a river at the decision-making table? How can we include the voice of a tree at the decision-making table? How can we include the voice of an other than human being at the decision-making table? There are many people, many human people around the world who are asking these same questions. We have different organizations, mostly companies actually, mostly businesses, that are adding nature, a specific ecosystem, as someone who's sitting at the board of directors. We personally believe that this is a very valid way to go, but it doesn't answer all the questions. Because in having someone, a human individual representing an ecosystem, representing all of nature, you're forgetting the fact that all the other members who are at that table are also part of nature. And all the other people who are sitting at that table are also part of ecosystems, and it's their responsibility to speak up for those ecosystems. But before I delve deeper into this form of pluralistic, ecocentric decision-making, I want to give you all a little background of how we came to this thought process. As you all know, we work with rights of nature. And just to give a mini summary of what rights of nature is, it is recognizing the legally enforceable rights of nature ecosystems and more than human entities. Those are civil rights types protections for ecosystems. This is a movement that at the base of this movement has been embodied in customary law in cultures around the world since time immemorial. However, currently, it started to gain traction in the 1970s, and then in the 2000s, the global rights of nature movement sparked. We currently are working as part of that global rights of nature movement. However, we also want to acknowledge the concept of rights is very complicated, because usually when you give rights to someone, you are excluding someone else. So rights tend to sometimes cement privileges, select human individuals while excluding others. And many of you know, the long legal and civil rights battles so for more people to be included as right bearers within, let's talk about the society in the United States of America. The concept of what rights is, however, is embodied in the way humans set practices of how to be in good relationship with other members of their community. And other beings that are not human also have practices, also have ways to orchestrate relationships. And rights is one of the ways that we have within this country of orchestrating relationships between individuals. However, we at Talking Rivers say that rights, we want to look beyond the concept of rights being privileges. Because instead of humans having rights to certain privilege, we believe that we have rights in relationship with land, water, the land and water that we call home. We have rights in nature. We have rights in land. We have rights in place, which means that we're part and not separate from the web of relationships. And in doing so, we're acknowledging we have a role inside of nature, but we also have a responsibility to represent the needs of nature, especially when we take decisions. So right now, I'm gonna ask you to do a little experiment with me. Imagine you are sitting in a room, and I'm going to use a nonprofit as an example. Nonprofit has a board of directors, and these board of directors are the people, the human people who are entrusted with shepherding, stewarding that organization. Imagine that you're sitting with all of these other humans. What if these humans decided that they were not just representing themselves as humans? What if they decided that they want to act on behalf of their shared home? They want to act on behalf of the watersheds that they're part of. And they want to acknowledge their responsibility to represent the living systems that sustain them. This means that instead of just speaking as humans, they're speaking as the representatives of the ecosystems, of the watersheds that they're part of. And they thus become a watershed representative. Instead of just being human board member, they're the watershed representative, representing the needs and the voice of the ecosystem systems on that decision-making table. This is a very complicated process, especially because we've been taught to think as if humans were acting on their own. But in this pluralistic ecocentric decision-making experiment or model, in the toolkit, we give several options for let's say a board of a nonprofit to take in representing nature, the natural world. You could either represent the ecosystem that you're part of, you could represent the watershed, you could represent all of nature, or you could even represent water because we're all part of the cycle of water. We all are made of water. In the toolkit, we specify the steps you need to take to actually take decisions as representatives of an ecosystem and how this could radically shift the way that we think about our own role in nature and how our actions and decisions affect nature. And to do this, we offer a few simple steps simple guiding steps about how we can all take decisions. The first step in decision making, and this is almost like a no-brainer, is when you take decisions, as a group, it is important that we all focus on the core values that we each have as an individual, and then individual human, and then compare them with the other humans in the room so you can create a moral compass, the core guiding values for an organization. However, what would happen if you take this moral compass and then compare it to the voice and the needs of the ecosystems you're representing? Many times it would match up perfectly. Other times, however, no. You need to take extra steps to make sure you're actually representing the needs of these ecosystems. And many people ask us, how do you know what the ecosystem needs? How do you know what the ecosystem is thinking? They don't have a human brain. They don't speak human words. What we usually respond is, we are not separate from the world around us, even though we like to think our brains make us more special. We are part of an interwoven tapestry of life. And we also have needs. We need to drink water. We need to eat what we consider food. We need to breathe air. And in doing that, we're doing things that many other entities need to live a good life. Many other beings and species need to live a good life. So even if it may be hard to imagine what a tree needs, what an American eel needs, in making decisions on behalf of them or alongside them, we need to focus on how we are preventing from our actions their needs and what we can do to actually, instead of hindering their needs, meet their needs. And of course, we need to remember that we're not taking, in making these decisions, we can't say, oh, it's not our fault that something bad happened because we're representing the entire ecosystem. No, we always, of course, need to own our decisions as humans who are trying to do something that is very hard and hasn't really been done before, at least within the society.
And so if you go to the toolkit, these are a summary of the documents Tzintzun just listed. We have an example of bylaw revisions that Tolkien River has adopted and have been approved by the state of New York. So if another organization will want to do that for their own bylaws, here we have an example. Of course, every organization is different, every organization has their own needs, so we imagine that they would vary according to that. Then we have examples for conservation easements that include rights of nature. That's something that has not really been tried much before, but an easement puts a set of protection on a specific piece of land, so to say. But they are more related to like the conservation and the laws that we have in place now. It would be interesting to see what kind of other protection you could add if the piece of land is considered as a person and thus has rights. So it would be added augmented protection. Then we have an example of a moral compass that acknowledges the rights of ecosystem, and also a nature personhood blueprint that can serve as an inspiration for other organizations.
And in doing this, I just want to say quickly that Talking Rivers as an organization has adopted all of the changes that you've seen. It's the first nonprofit in New York State that has done something similar. One for including rights in nature within the nonprofit system, within the nonprofit bureaucracy, but also for having the human board members say that they want to take up the responsibility to represent the needs of the ecosystems that they're part of. And to do this, we also want to emphasize that when we are talking about, for example, within a conservation easement, talking about protecting nature, this doesn't exclude, many times different NGOs, when they tend to protect nature, want to divide humans away from ecosystems. They want to protect wilderness, quote unquote wilderness, as if wilderness is intact and humans are separate. In doing this, we also want to emphasize that this doesn't exclude human needs or human interests, because we're all part of this tapestry of life. And then the complicated question that we also get is, how do I even know what an ecosystem needs? How can I even connect if I'm going to represent the ecosystem in a board? How can I connect with that ecosystem? And here we have steps for listening. The first thing that we usually say is, okay, stop, listen, and take time listening. Most of us are so glued to our devices, and we don't take even the time doing the work that we need to do, and we don't take the time to look up and be with the world around us, the world that sustains us. However, even when we're climbing up a mountain, many people just run up a mountain, take a picture, and come right back down. It's rare for human people now, to actually take the time to sit and be in a place for more than an hour. Just sit, be, and watch, and look and observe with all your senses. So we recommend that you take that time, to make that time throughout your days, in your weeks, to sit and be with the world around you. And in those moments, to look for the nature around you. Even if you're in the center of Manhattan, Bronx, Queens, a big city, or you're deep in the Adirondack woods. It's important to sit, be, and notice the connections between yourself and the world around you, the ecosystems that you love and that help sustain you. It is also helpful, we recommend, to find water. What does this mean? It means to think about where is the water coming from that's sustaining you? Is it coming from this water that comes from a glacier that then has been bottled and transported to you? Does it come from, in the case of most of what is known as New York City, does it come from the Ashokan Reservoir in the Catskill Mountains? Does it come from the ground underneath your feet? Does it come from the river that flows by you? If we're part of this water, and this water that flows through us makes us part of the ecosystem, it's important to recognize where this water comes from. And then once we have this knowledge, maybe we can take the extra step to see how we can help the water that's sustaining us. And we also recommend, of course, to spend time with other human neighbors, to spend time with forests and rivers. And for many people, that actually may be hard because if you're inside of a gigantic concrete city, it may be hard to be with a more than other than human being. And that is why it's also a privilege for many humans to be able to be with an other than human being. We personally at Talking Rivers believe that yes, you can find nature everywhere, but everyone, every human should have the right to be close to a living and thriving ecosystem.
And now we come to the final part of the toolkit, in which we talk about how can we speak alongside nature and co-create with nature. So we think we can do in two ways. This in two ways, of course, there are many other ways, but these are the two ways we explore in the toolkit. One of them, a way to speak alongside and listen to nature, is Western science. Western science is a way of listening to nature and speaking alongside nature, because Western science can give us the data and certain identifiers that tell us the health of an ecosystem. But we could even go beyond, and this can be a stretch for some people, but there have been scientists around the world that are doing this. What if the scientists who are studying a specific ecosystem or species acknowledged in their research that it wasn't just thanks to them that this research came to be, and these results were published? What if a scientist co-authored their research with the river they studied or the species they studied? It is happening. People are acknowledging this around the world. I should say that to create this toolkit, we had a series of focus groups in which we asked people what they thought about how we should take decisions, what they envisioned, what they thought would be right. And also we gathered together a group of scientists and asked them the hard questions of how can we have an ecocentric science, a science that takes more into consideration the needs of the ecosystem and doesn't just take like in an extractive way. How the society works, doesn't just extract data, but works with the ecosystem and acknowledges the role in the ecosystem that plays in their research as well. And some scientists are very open to it and others are not, as we saw in this focus group, because the concept of authorship and informed consent, according to them, was a barrier to doing these things, but not everybody. So that was a very interesting conversation we had. And the other way we think we can speak alongside nature and co-create with nature is also using art. And I imagine that looking at this presentation, you have deduced that Tzintzun and I are artists, and we have been using art to listen and co-create with nature, and also science, and merging the two together. We have been trying to give voice to nature. We have coming up a new project that's gonna be called Through the Eyes of Rivers, in which we will work with local scientists to bring forward their research about the health of the ecosystem they study. And we will work on giving those ecosystem voice through art, making the ecosystem speak about their health, as if they were human, of course, through a stage of imagination. And now to conclude this presentation, I'm gonna read you a story an example of how science and art can combine to give voice to ecosystems and tell us what's going on. Where death lives, Ragwit. We come when others live, take over empty spaces, forgotten lands where pain runs deep. They call for help. We hear, we come. Our roots dig into soil. We spread. Hold the ground, keep the memory in place. Earth is sick. Disease plagues and poison leaches into water. We are resistant. We hold strong and clean. Poison leaches into water. We hold strong. Take the poison in our bodies. We hold strong. We came from hot, dry lands. Star warmed our bodies, made our seeds resistant. Life wasn't always easy, but we persevered. We knew our place in the world, the stories we told, land stored. There are things future generations need to remember, and land knows. Collective memory shared. We work together, keeping our dry world alive. Star teaches us lessons. Water, scarce, tells us stories of resilience. We listen, learn, and put it all away. Land knows. They have always helped us, and together we keep our planet alive. Mutual support, safeguarding, a cycle, our lives. We breathe future generations into the air, letting wind take our stories, memories, hopes. More of us are born filling the gaps we have always occupied. There used to be a balance. We are strong and we go where we are needed most. We trade stories, we put them away, learn, listen, clean. Things started to change. Water carried new messages. Naked land, felled trees. Those who remain cold. They were asking for help. We took off. We breathed future generations further afield, asking wind to carry our messages to those who needed us. Our roots spread, our bodies multiplied. We filled the empty spaces, tried to help. At first, it was easy, until the poison arrived. We despaired. Water cried, the death toll unspeakable. We couldn't answer all the calls. We weren't strong enough, couldn't move fast enough. So we prayed, begged the land, begged our star to give us more strength, give us the power to help. Star answered. They heard our call. The air became hotter, summers longer. We suddenly had more food to grow. We expanded, breathed future generation further and further afield. Wind blew our stories, memories, hopes, and anger, taking us to faraway places, lands we had never explored. Our fury grew as we grew in number. What have they done? Who is killing the trees? Who is draining water? Who is choking rivers? Who are these plants that look all the same? Something is amiss. Land loses their memories. We are still not fast enough. Now we try to push others aside, take more space, help land. We need to absorb the damage. We need to fill the empty gaps, crumple the poisonous walls. We always come where death lives. We take over empty spaces, forgotten lands, where pain runs deep. So this was a story I wrote from the point of view of ragweed. It wasn't easy. I don't have the best relationship with ragweed since they are my bane in the fall in particular due to their extreme pollination endeavors. But it was an interesting effort because it made me shift my point of view of what actually this plant might be trying to do, of what they might be actually trying to achieve. And I did a little research on ragweed, and I discovered a lot of things, like that they came from the Sonoran Desert, and that's why they learned to survive in extreme climates. And ragweed grows around the world in harmed environments, such as roadsides, railroad embankments, agricultural fields, and any place where humans have disturbed the local plant communities. And nowadays, they're such a resilient plant, and with globalization, they have spread in every continent except Antarctica. It's an incredible plant, ragweed, beyond being invasive, because it produces a ginormous amount of seeds. Every plant produces between 3,000 and 5,000 seeds, which means they offer so much to the ecosystem they inhabit because they nourish many birds when they have to remain over winter, or ragweed helps them fuel their migration when they travel in the fall. They also feed mammal people, such as chipmunk, ground squirrel, voles, and even humans can eat ragweed seed, while rabbit and deer eat ragweed leaves. And as I said before, and most people who are allergic to ragweed probably know this, ragweed produces more than 1 billion pollen granules during the growing season, which means that the pollen, which is a ginormous amount of pollen, and the pollen can travel up to 400 miles, even over the sea. So it's an extremely resilient plant. They have so many resources. But this made me think that while it is an intense plant and is not disliked by farmers because it does kind of inhibit the growth of other plants, they have the capacity, like many plants, to extract heavy metals from the soil. And also they absorb a lot of CO2, and warmer weather, that's why they thrive. So a plant that spreads so fast in a world that is more and more harmed could be doing some good, in the sense that they clean land, and the research that has found that ragweed comes in, but at a certain point, if the ecosystem starts healing, probably even also thanks to the work of ragweed, then other plants come and ragweed little by little leaves. So this is a little bit of an example of how art and science can collaborate and help tell stories of plants like ragweed who are misunderstood, at least by humans, but who in reality are doing so much, and help us shift the way we perceive the world. And so to conclude, if you want to find the toolkit, you can follow this link, or you can simply go to Talking Rivers website and you'll find it in our menu bar. Should be easy to find. And we would like to thank all the people who, the organizations and funders who made this toolkit possible. And this includes the Rondak Diversity Initiative, who hosted us tonight. Thank you. Thank you for having us here. And now, if you have any questions, we are ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to go ahead. There's a question that showed up in the chat, and they asked, in Ecuador, the rights of nature were included in their constitution. Have you been in contact with any of the eco-activists in Ecuador?
Yes, we've been in contact. The rights of nature. I don't know if anyone here has been working with rights of nature around the world, but it's a very supportive movement. So yes, we've been in contact and kind of collaborated with folks in Ecuador. Yes.
Have there been any specific groups in the North Country that are currently working on with your toolkit to make some of the changes that you're working on?
So we know that there are many groups that are looking at it. Of course, it came out in August, and people take a while to digest the content. So we know that people are digesting it, or working with it, or working through it. So yes, there's specific groups that are working to make it happen. We actually, the people who are working most closely with, however, is actually there's a group in New York City, a nonprofit called No One's Ark. They probably be the first to apply it alongside us. And there are people around the world who actually are looking at it, even in the UK, and are looking to apply parts of it. So I don't have a specific person now to say that yes, because I don't want to say something and they decide not to do it. But there are groups here and around the world who are digesting the content and hopefully will apply it.
One of the exciting things about the webinar this evening is looking at where people are from. We have quite a group of international folks that have joined us, which is fantastic, since this is a universal topic. One of the questions is there any way you will translate it to Portuguese?
If someone wants to collaborate with us to translate to Portuguese, that would be amazing. I speak 3 languages, but I do not speak Portuguese. We could easily, Spanish could be one that we could translate it more easily because both speak Spanish, Italian as well, but not Portuguese, unfortunately, no. If they want to contact us, we can work on it together.
And then I should note that we are going to share the recording. So we will be sending that out to everyone that registered for the webinar, and it'll have contact information to the websites and all of that additional information for you. So if you want to reach out and talk to them at a later date after you've had time to digest, you'll be able to do that. Another question, is there a meeting point for groups and people using this methodology? How can we keep in contact?
That is an amazing question, a very exciting question. Yes, we would love to connect with anyone who wants to work to approach this methodology or these ideas in any way they can. So yes, if you can reach out directly to us, we can make that happen.
And then another question, how do you work with school systems?
So we have presented ourselves personally in a number of school systems. Um, yes, specifically teachers of biology. We have not, we have gone into some classes in which I think they teach biology. Um, we've, and we are currently working with a professor from SUNY Oneonta of how to include this curriculum specific, these ideas in a curriculum specifically designed for teachers who teach STEM. So that is a project that hopefully we'll embark on. And we're working again with Professor Ramsunio Nyanta on that project.
And then Tiffany, you have your hand raised?
I do. Blake, I was wondering, can you take us a little bit through your process of speaking from the point of ragweed? I just think that's, just like as an artist, I think it's a fascinating thing to put yourself in the shoes of something else. And just can you talk a little bit about that process and what that was like for you?
So I've written several stories from the point of view of an other than human being, and I selected them considering so that they could tell us a little bit the health of the state of the world in many different ways, like one from the point of view of sargassum sea, the sargassum seaweed, one from the point of view of snowshoe hare. And the process is always like try to transcend myself as a person and really try to feel what they are feeling, what they're needing. And of course, science helps. So I will document myself, I will read some journal articles, some books, and from there, then try to, from the facts that I gather, trying to hear the voice of this being, and like and give them their personal voice. So each story has a slightly different tone, has a slightly different even way of using vocabulary, and they're not necessarily easy to read. So this has been a little bit my process. It's just like learning and then going beyond what I learned to see what they have to say. And sometimes it has been magical, like with ragweed. It would have never occurred to me if I hadn't tried that maybe ragweed is trying to save us all.
That's fantastic. And are these these writings, is this literature part of, can we find it on your website?
I have several stories published on the Talking Wings website. It can also be accessed to Talking Rivers. This specific collection of stories, that Ragweed belongs to, I hope it will be published in a book. I'm still waiting from the publisher to hear. So keeping my
But
fingers.
if we looked up Talking Rivers, does that link to Talking Wings?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
And just a quick reminder, we have dropped the exit survey link into the chat, as well as a reminder about the two upcoming webinar, or the one upcoming webinar on October 29th, and then the in-person one-day workshop on November 15th. So please check those out if you haven't already. Any other questions?
And thank
Can I
you for
say,
sharing, Mary. We'll make sure that we pass this on to our speakers. Go ahead.
I would like to share something that I think is very pertinent to the conversation today. I just put a link in the chat. So I'm a doctoral candidate at University of Maryland, and we have a professor who she's an activist, a climate. She's the only one here in international education policy that does a climate change class. And she motivated us to be activists. And one of the projects that the class did was to try to, we gather with a movement that was trying to save a forest from being destroyed to build a development, student housing here just next to the university. And we created this site. If you can see, I put this, we call it Voices of the Woods. And we visit the woods, and we decided that we are here fighting for these plants, and they want to speak. They want to say something to us. They want to be in this fight with us. And so we created these signs, and we put on the trees for a time, like they were saying something, like hug us, don't tug us, or we breathe the same air. Now stop the greed. We were in the news, and I believe, because of this class, and we go back to the site every class that she offers. We go back and we reiterate our commitment to save this forest. So I believe that the forest is still there because of other efforts, but also our efforts. So we need to give voice to nature any way we can, because they are talking to us. We are ignorant to not speak their language, but they feel us and we feel them too, right? So it's just one thing that we did that I wanted to share to inspire others. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. Just clicked on the link, and the pictures are very powerful. Such an amazing project, so inspiring. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give a minute for any last questions. And people are putting some recommendations. Some folks have noted some books, etc., in the chat. So please take a look at that as well before you go. There's a couple of different books that are in there. Otherwise, we just want to say thank you to Talking Wings for sharing with us today. A reminder that they will be with us in November 15th. It'll be a different session. It's not a repeat. It's new presentation, new information. So please join us on that day if you can. There's more information on the websites. We drop those back again in the chats. And with that, I would just like to say thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And again, Talking Wings, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it, and the work that you're doing for all creatures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your work.